Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. The astute among you will have noticed that I'm not the rabbi. She is taking a very, very well-earned vacation. So for the month of July, there will be folks filling in. And remember also, as is our custom, only Friday evening services in July, and the next Saturday morning service will be in August, on first Saturday in August. So, okay. So without any further ado, I'm going to find my page. That'll be a good place to start. Let's begin on page 24. And we'll do some singing. We'll see how that goes. And we'll do some reading. We're really on a skeleton staff. I meant to have Albert Amar with me tonight, and Albert's not feeling well, so he's very courteously not coming and spreading whatever it is he might have. So we're a cappella tonight. So Yedid Nefesh on page 24. Yedid Nefesh Avarachaman, Yedid Nefesh Avarachaman, Meshoch Avdecha, El Retzonecha, Meshoch Avdecha, El Retzonecha, Yarutz Avdecha, Kemo Ayal, Yishtachave Lai Lai Lai, Yala Lai Lai Lai, El Hadarecha, Yarutz Avdecha, Kemo Ayal, Yishtachave Lai Lai Lai, Yala Lai Lai Lai, El Hadarecha. And now we are going to welcome Shabbat by kindling Shabbat lights, and it's my pleasure to call upon Ruth Ostrower, who is going to lead us in one of the readings on page 20 or 21. And then the blessing is on page 23.
We read responsively on the top of page 21. This Shabbat sheds light upon us, light for the days to come. We have leisure by which to see the world with new and grateful eyes. We have time now to look inward, and now we are free to embrace family and friends, to make our lives simpler and more complete.
We think of our homes and those we love, when we call to mind the duties and affections of home. How greatly are all blessings enriched, all cares and sorrows softened.
May the hearts of parents and children always be turned to one another, that our homes may be sanctuaries of love and devotion. May we use this Shabbat to bring happiness to our family life and blessing to our people. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadru ner shal Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu Lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. turn to page 29, and we will sing Lecha Dodi, verses 1, 2, 5, and 9, rising and facing the doors of our sanctuary for the final verse to welcome the Shabbat bride. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mekabela. Lecha Dodi, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mekabela. Shamor v'zakor b'dibur echad, Ishmianu lelham yuchad, Adonai echad u'shemo echad, L'shemo tifaret v'tila. Lecha Dodi, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki hi mekor ha'bracha, erosh mikedem nesucha, sof ma'aseh v'mashka v'tchila. Lecha Dodi, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mekabela. Hitoreri, ki ba'orech kuli ori, ori shedaberi. Kevod Adonai Elohim yigla. Lecha Dodi, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mekabela. Mo'i shalom ateret bala, gam b'simcha uv'sola, kavochem unei am segula, bo'i chala. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat mekabela. Bo'i shalom ateret bala, gam b'simcha uv'sola, kavochem unei am segula, bo'i chala. Turn to page 34 and read responsively, How can I sing? How can I sing of day and night when it is God who formed them?
How can I sing of heaven and earth when it is God who decreed them?
How can I sing of mountains and hills when it is God who planted them?
How can I sing of seas and deserts when it is God who formed them?
And how can I sing of earth and its fullness when it is God who bade them be?
I shall sing to God who fashioned all that is beyond earth. It is the God of himself.
We rise in body and spirit for the call to prayer. Lai, 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 Barechu et Adonai HaMevorach Baruch we will read responsively under Bet on page 37. God of all the worlds, how insignificant we are in your sight, and how minute in your presence. You are a creator of a universe so vast that the effort to conceive it overwhelms the mind. Our mightiest telescopes scan but a corner of it. The rays of light that reach us from distant galaxies began their journey long before we came to be. Counted from first creation, the earth we live on was born but yesterday, and we made our appearance on it only a moment ago.
When we consider your heavens, the work of your fingers,
The moon and the stars that you have established. What is humanity that you are mindful of us? What immortals that you consider us? Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim. We join together on page 38 in singing Ahavat Olam. Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amecha Ahavta, Amcha Ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadeta, Otanu limadeta. Alkein Adonai Eloheinu b'shochenu, Ukmeinu nahasiach behukecha, V'nismach be'ivrei Toratecha, U'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Kihem chayenu, Ve'yorech yameinu, Uvahem negeyomam v'layla, negeyomam v'layla, Ve'atamacha al tasir, Mimenu le'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. And we rise on page 40 for the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Ve'avta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol lavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom ha'levavecha v'shinatam levanecha v'dibarta b'am v'shivtecha b'beitecha u'lechtecha b'derech u'shoktecha u'kumecha u'shartam le'od al yadecha v'hayu letotafod b'neinecha u'kaftam al mezuzot beitecha u'vishalecha v'man tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'ten kedoshim le'elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'elohim ani Adonai Elohechem emet. Please be seated. And we'll turn to page 42 and read at the top of the page responsively under Aleph. All this we hold to be true and certain. The Eternal alone is our God, there is none else, and we are Israel, God's people.
Divine protector, delivers us and save us from twisted darkness.
You perform wonders without number, marvels that surpass our understanding.
You are just the Lord's life and revive us when we stumble.
You did wonders for us in Egypt, miracles and marvels in the land of Pharaoh.
To let your people Israel forever to serve your freedom.
When your children beheld your power, they praised you and gave you thanks. Freely they accepted your sovereignty, and Moses, Miriam, and all Israel sang to you with great joy. And we sing that same song on page 44, Mi Chamocha. Mi Chamocha Ba'elim Adonai, Mi Chamocha Nedar B'Kodesh, Norati Lo Tosef Eleh, Norati Lo Tosef Eleh, Malchutecha Ra'u Banecha, Bokeya Yam Livnei Moshe, Ze'eli Anu Ve'amru, Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Va'ed, Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Va'ed. As you redeemed Israel and saved us from arms stronger than our own, so may you redeem all those who are still oppressed and persecuted. We praise you, Eternal One, the Redeemer of Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. And let's read together at the top of page 45, the hidden light. And God said, let there be light. This first light God made before the sun and stars. God showed it to David, who burst into song. This was the light Moses saw on Sinai. At the creation, the universe from end to end radiated light, but it was withdrawn. And now it is stored away for the righteous until all the worlds will be in harmony again, and all will be united and whole. But until this future world is established, this light, coming out of darkness and formed by the most secret, is hidden. Light is sown for the righteous. But if this light were to vanish, the world could not exist. Rather, every instant that Torah is studied and lived, God sends a slender ray from that hidden light to bring light to the world. Thus, the act of creation is renewed each day. And we'll turn to page 47 and read God of our ancestors. Why do we say our God and the God of our ancestors? There are two sorts of believers. One for whom faith has been handed down from our ancestors. The other has arrived at faith through searching and contemplation.
In the first instance, faith
cannot be shaken, no matter how many objections are raised to it. But there is a flaw in this. Faith is passed on from generation to generation as part of our evolution. So everything that thought means. The advantage of the second is that faith is reached through its own power, through much searching and thinking. But this faith also has a flaw. It is possible to shake it by offering contrary evidence.
The one who binds both legs and faith is invulnerable. That is why we say our God, because of our searching, and the God of our ancestors, because of our sanctification.
Yitgadol ve'yitkara shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayedecho bet Yisrael. V'gala uv'izman kari ve'yimeru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam le'omaya yitbarach yitbarach ve'yishtabach ve'yitpa'ar ve'yikromam ve'yitnaseh ve'yithadar ve'yithaleh ve'yithalal shemei l'kudisham ve'richu La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata dami rabbi alma ve'yimeru amen. Rise and face the ark for the Amidah. Adonai
לפתע תפתחו כי יגיד תהילתך. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו וזרועותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי יצחק, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי יעקב, אלוהי רחל, ואלוהי לאה. האל הגדול, הגיבור הנורא, אל עליון, גומר חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר עשי אבות ואמהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו ביחד. מלך עוזר ומושיע מגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור אדוני, מחיה הכל אתה, רב יושיע, מקלקל חיים בחסד, מחיה הכל רחמים רבים, צומח נופלים והופך עולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממיתים חיי, ומצביח ישוע, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Please be seated. And we read responsively under Aleph on page 54. You are one, your name is one, and there is none like your people Israel, a people unique on the earth. A garland of glory have you given us, a crown of salvation, a day of rest and holiness.
Abraham rejoiced, Isaac sang, Jacob his children were furnished by his trust. In this rest and love and shield, truth and faithfulness and peace, life and safety. It is the perfect rest of your will.
May your children come to understand that this Shabbat rest links them to you, that by it they may hallow your name. And we continue on page 59. I saw Jerusalem from Mount Scopus, and she was perfect and whole, little yet limitless, within her borders contained and yet uncontainable.
Peace was the hills of Judah, wrapped in mountain blue. Our ministry priests, silently the meditate blessing, regardless of their sins.
And on the hills and pits the embers still whispering burn, as if spice were being perfumed there in the twilight by the roasting of the sun's coals on censers of shadows.
And all Jerusalem was worshiping, like a single coal kept on the altar, that each nation and guardian might come and rightly their thoughts, and take to one another.
Baruch atah Adonai, hamachazir shechinato l'Tzion. We praise you, Eternal One, who brings your Shekhinah to Zion. Modim anachnu lach, she'ata hu Adonai Eloheinu. Modim anachnu lach, she'ata hu Adonai. Modim anachnu lach, she'ata hu Eloheinu. Modim anachnu lach, she'ata hu Adonai. On page 61, may it be your will, our God and God of our ancestors, to remove all wars and bloodshed from our world, and rather to draw great and wondrous peace into the world. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev, velo yimdu old milchama.
Rather, all people will come to know and understand the truth, that we have not come into the world for strife and war, hatred or jealousy, anger or bloodshed. We have come into this world to know you, and you be eternally blessed. Therefore be merciful to us, and fulfill for us what is written, I shall bestow peace upon the earth, and you shall lie down untroubled by anyone.
Let justice well up like water,
And righteousness is a mighty stream. The whole earth shall be filled with knowledge of Adonai, as the water fills the sea. And we continue with a prayer for peace. Shalom Rav. Shalom Rav, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech Adon, lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech Adon, lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. And we take a few moments to pray the prayers of our own hearts. Say shalom bimromav, say shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol bnei Adam. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. So this week's Torah portion is Parshat Korah, which is the book of Numbers, chapters 16, 17, and 18. So what's in this week's parsha? There are basically two different parts. This is the book of Numbers, so it's a pretty safe bet that there's going to be a story about the Israelites wandering in the wilderness, kvetching. And as it happens, Torah scholars believe that there are actually two separate kvetching stories here, interwoven into a single narrative. That's how often this happens. We actually have to start bundling them up in order to save time. So, as usually happens in Numbers, some troublemakers make trouble. God gets angry. Moses and Aaron intervene to ask for mercy. There's some serious consequences for the bad guys, and the people learn their lesson, at least until the next parsha. The second part of the portion deals with the offerings of the people to God and how, specifically, the Levites and the Kohanim get to divide these up amongst themselves as compensation for doing the holy work of running the temple. It also talks about how, even though the Levites will live off of the tithes of the people, they themselves will also tithe and so forth. But which of these themes should we talk about tonight? The wrathful, smitey God, or the importance of dedicating your first fruits to the holy work of the community? You probably know that I've just become Solel's treasurer, and it was only a couple of weeks ago that our membership financial commitment letters went out, so naturally it makes sense that I talk about tithing. I'm just kidding. I'm going to talk about the wrathful, smitey God. So who was Korah, and what exactly was his beef? Korah was a Levite, and you'll recall that the Levites are the tribe whose job it is to help the Kohanim with all the grunt work around the tabernacle, while the Kohanim take care of all the holiest tasks, like performing the sacrifices. Korah and a couple of his buddies, Dathan and Abiram, got a gang of 250 leaders of the community all riled up, and they all confronted Moses and Aaron. And Dathan and Abiram, they were from the tribe of Reuben, which I will come back to in a second. So Korah and his mob, they go off to Moses and Aaron and complain about who gets to be in charge. Korah says to Moses and Aaron, I'm quoting from Numbers 16:3, "You have gone too far, for all the community are holy, all of them, and Adonai is in their midst. Why then do you raise yourself above Adonai's congregation?" Okay, so Korah doesn't like that he is mopping the floors while Aaron and the Kohanim get all the sweet jobs. What about Dathan and Abiram? As I mentioned, they're descended from Reuben, Jacob's firstborn son. And let's remember who is Moses' right-hand man and his successor? Joshua, son of Nun, son of Ephraim, son of Joseph, Jacob's 11th son. Dathan and Abiram don't like that their tribe isn't getting the respect that they think it deserves. Well, what does Moses do? The first thing he does is he falls on his face. He must have been thinking, oh boy, here we go again. Moses tells Korah and his mob to go and get their fire pans and offer a sacrifice, since they think they're up to the task. This goes predictably poorly for Korah and his rabble, and God sends a giant flame down, and that is the end of Korah and his rebellion. With Dathan and Abiram, God opened up the earth and swallowed them and everything that belonged to them whole, and if that isn't enough, a plague then breaks out in the camp. God wanted to go further and wipe out the whole community, since it says in chapter 16, verse 19, that Korah gathered the whole community against Moses and Aaron at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Luckily for the Israelites and for us, Moses and Aaron begged God to be merciful and not to punish the whole community for the sins of a few people. Aaron also undertook some pretty heroic efforts to help limit the impact of the plague and keep it from spreading any further. So that's what happens in the first part of this week's portion. And what are we going to make of all that? I've said before, and I'm going to say every time the rabbi makes the mistake of letting me up here on the bima, that I believe it when our tradition says there are no wasted words in Torah. Everything is in here for a reason. What's more, I believe, and wholeheartedly, that the reason isn't just to give us a history lesson. The Torah is not the Globe and Mail or the Farmer's Almanac. Everything in Torah has an important lesson for us about how we should be conducting ourselves in the world today. The Torah may have been written at a particular time, in a particular place, by a particular people, but its importance, its value is for everyone, in every place, and for all time. Does that mean that we need to somehow conform to the way we think, to one narrow viewpoint, particularly the viewpoint of the authors of Torah? Not at all. The world moves on, society evolves. That's God's plan for the world. If you take it just at face value, though, there can be some things we read in Torah that are pretty uncomfortable. A wrathful God who smites protesters, swallows up whole families, and sends plagues, for example. Does that mean that we've moved beyond Torah, that it's merely an interesting historical document? No, not at all. The Torah is just as meaningful for us in our time, in our society. That meaning is there for us to find. This, for me, is how you can tell that Torah is scripture and not just something that somebody wrote down once, which seemed pretty clever at the time. Okay, I've made this bold assumption that this story of Korach's rebellion and the way God puts it down in no uncertain terms is an important moral lesson for us today. How so? Some of you might be wondering, is what Korach did actually even bad? All he said was that Moses and Aaron shouldn't be keeping all the power for themselves because everyone is holy. After all, doesn't God say in Exodus chapter 19, verse 6, "You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation"? And in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 2, "Speak to the whole Israel community and say to them, 'You shall be holy, for I, Adonai, your God, am holy.'" Isn't this exactly what Korach said? For all the community are holy, all of them, and Adonai is in their midst. If Korach is really just making a good point, doesn't the punishment seem not only excessive, but maybe even unjust? Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our ancestors, is a collection of Jewish wisdom from the Mishnah. And Pirkei Avot 5:17 says, "Every dispute that is for the sake of heaven will in the end endure, but one that is not for the sake of heaven will not endure. Which is the controversy that is for the sake of heaven? Such was the controversy of Hillel and Shammai. And which is the controversy that is not for the sake of heaven? Such was the controversy of Korach and all his congregation." Hillel and Shammai represent two schools of thought in the Mishnah, usually arguing different sides of any given point. And a little spoiler alert, Hillel almost always wins. But this ongoing disagreement between the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai is seen to be virtuous. Why? Because they were arguing over how best to understand God's plan for us. The beef that Korach had with Moses and Aaron, on the other hand, isn't seen as being worthy. And why is that? Korach says, God said we're all holy. But is that what God said? God said to us, "You shall be holy, for I, Adonai, your God, am holy." Did you catch that? It's not a statement about what is. It's a command about what is supposed to be. This is the mistake that Korach made. He wanted to claim what he felt he deserved as his right. What he was singularly avoiding was worrying at all about what is his responsibility. The Torah is teaching us that when a bunch of selfish troublemakers manufacture outrage in the public for the sake of their own selfish ends, absolutely no good will come of it. And what's more, without an heroic intervention by people who put their responsibilities ahead of their privilege, the whole community could easily find themselves suffering. We don't have to look very far in our day and age to see that this lesson from the Torah is still one some people need to learn. We don't have to look any further, in fact, than Ottawa this weekend, where a bunch of white supremacist anti-vax yabos are marching around all butthurt that other people expect them to behave as if they live in a society. Sadly, I don't think any of the yabos are going to be joining us tonight on the live stream, and so they won't be learning this important lesson. Maybe some of them might pick it up later on the on-demand video archive. Even if they don't, maybe especially because they won't, it's important for those of us who are here, reading Torah and looking for its deeper meaning, to learn the other part of the lesson of Korach's rebellion. That it takes people who do understand their responsibilities to counteract the damage done by those who only want to think about what's due to them, not what they owe to God and the community. That's the lesson of this week's parashah. That, and please remember to look for your membership financial commitment letter in your inbox. Shabbat shalom. So now we are going to think about those in our community and our friends and family who are in need of healing of body or spirit. This week we are thinking particularly of Shirley Herman, Esther Walkenmark, Rick Valentine, Simon Green, Marlene Friedman, Linda Levenhack, Jack Kudlitz, Francis Van Tyne, Suzanne Shear Stimson, Bernie McLennan, Harriet Lockman, Jill Rich, Nicola Proetti, Eliyahu Ben Yitzhak Vasara, Rebecca Bogdel, Parker Carco, Philip Shepard, Carl Katz, Nicole Hansen, Raina Rowan, Gillan Naruzi, Madeline Kitson, Kathy Kitson, Sharon Burr, Dee Hickey, Lorraine DaCosta, Dr. Jack Richmond, Nettie Sandalovici, Adela Sur, Al Lofsky, Michael Freeman, Ann Steinbach, Erwin Milgram, Evelyn Tyndall, Amanda Shank, Harav Ilana Miriam Bakhava, Daniel Black, Jean Elizabeth Pitt, Fran Cook Kaiser, Shmuel Ben Devara, and Pauline Portman. And turn to page 133 in our Sidurim and sing the prayer for healing. Misha Be'erach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Limotenu. This is the source of healing, who bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misha Be'erach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. Please turn to page 135 and rise for the prayer for the state of Israel. Tzur Yisrael v'goalo, Barechna epinat Yisrael, Hagshamat tikvatenu. Rock and Redeemer of Israel, place your blessing upon the state of Israel, the realization of our hope for a Jewish homeland. Send your light and your truth to all its inhabitants. Spread over them the shelter of your peace. Bestow insight upon its leaders, judges, and representatives, that they may pursue justice, freedom, and integrity. Visit blessing upon all your people, Israel, wherever we dwell. Plant the love of Zion into our hearts, that our footsteps may raise to walk upon its soil. And may the vision of your prophet Isaiah soon be fulfilled. For Torah shall come forth from Zion, and God's word from Jerusalem. And let us say, Amen. Please remain standing and turn to page 149 for the Elena.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, lated gula liotzer breshit, asher sam kalkenu le'afech et shemo, ve'gor aleinu lehamlik malchuto, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shehu Notei Shamayim ve'oseh haaretz, Moshav Yikaro b'shamayim imal, Ushchinatu zo, ve'gavei meromim, Hu Eloheinu Einod, Emet Malkeinu Efesulato, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום וחשבותה אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Please be seated and turn to page 155. And we'll read together at the top of the page. In nature's ebb and flow, God's eternal law abides. God is our support in the struggles of life and our hope in death. In God's care are the souls of all the living and the spirits of all flesh. God gives strength and comforts us. O life of our life, soul of our soul, cause your light to shine into our hearts. Fill us with trust in you and turn us again to the tasks of life. And may the memory of our loved ones inspire us to continue their work for the coming of the Messianic age. It's with sadness that we announce the recent death just yesterday of Ellen Becker, dear friend of Marlene Tash. And this week marks the yahrzeit, the anniversary of death for the following: Maurice Goldfein, uncle of John Lewson, great uncle of Simon, Emily, and Zachary. Nettie Simon, aunt of Roz Allen. Burton Netto, father of Sherry Amar, grandfather of Adam, Nathan, and Jacob. Charles Heller, grandfather of Howard Shapiro. Dennis Simon, father of Jenny Denter. Al Mackay, father of Jason, grandfather of Mackenzie, Liam, and Shelby. Doris Adler, mother of Ralph, grandmother of Allison and Michael. Sally Garber, mother of Gail Feldman, grandmother of Michelle, Jessica, and Ryan. And Henry Zoberman, father of Helene Fleischman. Zichronam livracha, may their memories always be for a blessing. As those who are mourning, please rise first so that we can say to you, Mina hamakom tinachamu. And now we all rise as a community in solidarity to recite the Kaddish for those who have no one to say it for them. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemi rabbah v'yalma divrach yerutei v'yamlik machutei v'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayei decho b'ik Yisrael v'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam v'yomei almayah Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yihadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei v'kudesha b'richu v'eila mikol b'chata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechemata v'amiram b'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabbanim shamayim v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mamav hu ya'aseh shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol b'nei Adam, v'imru. Amen. Please be seated. Now, I'm just scanning the room for any other board members. It looks like I'm it. John Lewson meant to be here tonight, and unfortunately he has been exposed to somebody with COVID, and so out of an abundance of caution, he is also staying home. So you get to, it's the Joel show tonight. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. The good news is the announcements are a short list because it's the summer and things are slowing down a little bit. I mentioned earlier that there will be no Saturday services in the month of July, so our next service will be Friday, July the 8th at 8 p.m., and that's a regular Shabbat service. Our Thursday lunches with Rabbi Pollack will continue at 12 noon by Zoom until July 14th, and then they will resume again on August 4th. And for everything else that you need to know, it will be in your Shamas, which came out last night, and on the website. And now it is my pleasure to call upon Frank Kay, who is going to lead us in Kiddush on page 163. Please rise.
Erev Shishi, out of the whole universe, sky, earth, and all that's array, was completed. With the seventh day, God had ended the work of creation, and rested with all the work completed. Then God blessed the seventh day and called it holy. And with this day, God had completed the work of creation. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, v'arei li hagod.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Orei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu b'shabbat kodsho v'ahavat uvratzon kinchilanu zikaron lema'aseh bereshit ki hu yom tehillah l'midrash kodesh zecher l'tziyat Mitzrayim ki banu v'harta Yotanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha ve'ahava uvratzon inotanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha-shabbat. L'chaim. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I hope you have a Shabbat of great peace and shleimut, interrupted only slightly and briefly for some fireworks in an hour or so. Happy Canada Day and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Bill.